Good. Well, good afternoon. I am Platte County Prosecuting Attorney Eric Zahnd. I appreciate you all showing up today. You'll hear from many of these people momentarily, but with us today also is Mayor Quentin Lucas, Mayor of Kansas City, Platte County Sheriff Mark Owen, Clay County Prosecuting Attorney Dan White, Buchanan County Prosecuting Attorney Ron Holliday, Buchanan County Sheriff Bill Pewitt, and Kansas City Police Department Deputy Chief Mark Francisco. Thank you all for joining us today for what is an important discussion regarding Missouri's spiraling violent crime rate. You know, there's been a lot of attention recently about the problems faced in the urban core in both Kansas City and St. Louis. Sometimes overlooked in that important discussion is that crime wave is also hitting counties like Platte County, like Clay County, like Buchanan County, that sometimes we don't think about when we think about violent crime. Together with my colleagues here today, we want to not only describe the violent crime problem that we are facing as a state, but also solutions to that problem. Governor Parson and the Missouri legislature have it within their power to give police and prosecutors the additional tools that we need to help stem the bloodshed all across the state of Missouri. We're asking Governor Parson and the Missouri legislature to do just that, to give us the tools to safeguard the good, hardworking, law-abiding citizens across the state of Missouri, and give us the tools to ensure that truly dangerous, violent criminals, the worst of the worst, will not merely receive a slap on the wrist when they prey on their victims. Now, let me be clear, this is not a partisan issue. You see standing here and you will hear speaking from this podium, both Republican and Democrat elected officials and a mayor who runs on a nonpartisan basis. But we are all united in this mission, a mission that all Missourians should be united on, and that is to decrease the carnage from truly violent criminals who are wrecking our state in really unmeasurable ways. Now, again, I'm sure that many of you in this room are somewhat familiar with the issues we face as a result of the growing violent crime problem, but I want to now introduce several people to speak briefly about violence in our communities and what we can do. And I want to start with Mayor Quentin Lucas. Mayor. By the way, I want to say about the mayor, thanks so much for coming a little bit north of Kansas City's boundaries. But as the mayor knows well, and many of you, about half of Platte County's population actually are residents of the city of Kansas City, a great city that encompasses 4 counties, I think the only city in the United States.
We're very lucky to do so. Thank you so much. I want to thank Prosecutor Zahnd, Prosecutor White, so many who are with us today. When I got elected mayor, which was about a year ago, I've been in office for 11 months, we knew at the time that violent crime was probably our most important issue in Kansas City. What we have seen in the 11 months since is that if you weren't aware before, then you absolutely know it's aware. And you know that it's a huge issue for those of us in Kansas City. And I will note, not just for Kansas Cityans who live south of the river, but also in the Kansas City, Missouri Northland, where we've had more homicides than we're used to. We've had more shootings than we're perhaps used to. We've had more incidents of significant challenge for all of us. So I will just tell you very briefly why I'm here today. First of all, I've known about some of the legislation we've been working on for, it seems almost like a year now. And I certainly respect those in the state legislature, Republicans and Democrats, who I think have worked to craft legislation that is worthwhile, that's important, and that can be a change maker for our prosecutors, our police officers, but more importantly for all of us in Missouri. And to note why this is so important. If you're the mayor of a city where a 4-year-old is shot in their sleep, if you're the mayor of a city where 2 officers are shot in one day, if you're the mayor of a city where everyone every day is saying, what can we do to make some level of difference? You can't turn a blind eye to how important it is that we make sure that prosecutors, police officers have the tools that they need. And I will say this, I am somebody who is lenient on some things, And I think every prosecutor here and every police officer knows there are different types of offenses. But what we have seen in Missouri is that violent criminals have tried to, in many ways, destroy and terrorize our way of life and so many of our neighborhoods in Kansas City. And another thing that I think you've seen is this. I can't talk to any more mothers of deceased young people or spouses of police officers or any others and just simply say, well, we're working on it. You know, they've been hearing us say we're working on it for a long time. We have tools that can help at least make some level of a difference. And so that's why I'm here today. And that's why I know everybody else is here today, because we have seen enough. We have seen enough carnage, enough violence, enough devastation in our communities. We have seen that there are some people, and we certainly know the cases, where there has been a revolving door of criminality, where there are people that are arrested, released, and they come back and commit more offenses. And indeed, those are some of the individuals that you saw harm Kansas City, Missouri police officers just last week. So I come here as a mayor of a city of a lot of different viewpoints to say one simple thing. I think all of us in Kansas City, all of us in Northwest Missouri, and all of us really throughout Missouri are tired of this challenge. And we recognize that this is but one of many tools we have to make a difference. The work that these prosecutors and our police officers and our sheriffs will talk about today doesn't mean we don't care about everything else under the sun. We will continue to invest in education. We'll continue to invest in so many other resources. But what we're also going to say is we're not waiting 5 years and 10 years to make a difference. We're not waiting forever or another generation to see our homicide rate, our shooting rate, our violent crime rate change. We need to see change now. It's essential to the future of our communities, and that's why I'm so proud to stand with everybody here. With that, thank you, Prosecutor Zahnd, and I'm sure I'll stick around for questions.
Mayor, thank you very much. Let me next introduce Deputy Chief Mark Francisco from the Kansas City Police Department, who can also talk a little bit more about what we're seeing specifically within the city limits of Kansas City.
Thank you, Prosecutor Zahnd, for the opportunity to come and address this news conference. I think when addressing violent crime, it's helpful to have some numbers for perspective. Kansas City's homicide rate currently stands at 99, which is a 41% increase over last year's already high rate. This puts Kansas City on pace for over 200 homicides this year if the increase continues. Bullet skin shootings are currently 11% higher than last year, with 328 living victims. The community suffered recently, as the mayor discussed, with a victim as young as 4 years old, another 12 years old. And last week we had the two officers shot in one day on two separate calls for service. One of these officers remains in critical condition as we speak here. The amount of violence on the streets of Kansas City is unacceptable, and we must have the tools to do a better job of having impactful solutions. And that's what we're here discussing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Now let me introduce my colleague from just east of here, Clay County Prosecuting Attorney Dan White.
Thank you, Mr. Zahnd. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Daniel White, Clay County Prosecuting Attorney, and I'm here requesting the governor sign Senate Bill 600. It will add necessary abilities to prosecuting across the state of Missouri. And to be clear, we're talking about serious violent crime. We're talking about serious crime. We're talking about repeat offenders. We've made some huge strides over the past 10 years, not just in Clay, but in other jurisdictions on nonviolent offenses. We have a veterans court. We have a mental health court. We have a drug court. All of those have phenomenal success rates, right? Those programs work, but they're not filled with violent, serious crimes, people who commit violent, serious crimes. Those go to the Department of Corrections, and a lot of times not for long enough. Senate Bill 600 will change that. So hopefully it will be signed, and it will add another arrow, another couple of arrows into the quiver used by prosecuting attorneys across this state and by law enforcement across the state to put violent offenders where they belong, and that's behind bars. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Let me also now introduce my colleague just to the north of here, Buchanan County Prosecuting Attorney Ron Holiday. Again, I think there's sometimes a misconception that the crime wave is just confined to our major cities. But the fact is, cities like St. Joseph and Buchanan County are suffering from the very sorts of things that we deal with here in Platte, Clay, Jackson counties as well.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Eric, for inviting me to this important news conference to respectfully urge the governor to sign Senate Bill 600. As Eric said, my name is Ron Holiday. I'm the prosecuting attorney in Buchanan County, approximately 35 minutes north of here. I've been with the prosecutor's office since 2005 as first assistant, became the prosecutor in 2019. We've had a dramatic increase in violent gun-related crime, beginning, I would say, 5 years ago. 2017, we had 8 murders in St. Joseph, Buchanan County. 2018, 5 murders. Last year, I have relatively small staff, 7 assistant prosecutors. We prosecuted 5 murder cases to trial. Well, that's a huge undertaking for a small prosecutor's office. And as Dan said, we have been strong proponents of alternative sentencing in Buchanan County. We've had alternative treatment courts for over 20 years, but that's not what we're talking about here. What I like about Senate Bill 600, what all prosecutors like, is it addresses what I deal with everywhere I go and speak, every community meeting I go to, every victim I talk to, every group in town that I talk to. What they talk about is gun-related violence, and that's in part what this bill addresses. And I'm a strong proponent of Senate Bill 600. It will give prosecutors and courts some tools to address violent criminals and repeat offender criminals. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Sheriff Pruitt, Sheriff of Buchanan County.
Prosecutor Zahnd, thank you for the invitation to be here. Appreciate everybody. My name is Bill Pruitt. I am the Sheriff of Buchanan County. I've been with the Buchanan County Sheriff's Office a little over 33 years as sheriff. So I've been around a few days and have been able to see changes in the crime rate. And as some of my colleagues have echoed here, crime has become global. I think what we need to understand here is that we need the tools to help protect our citizens who are being victimized by violent crime. That is the key. That is what we're looking for, is the ability to take care of and protect our citizens and allow the prosecutors to then be able to take that case to completion and do what they need to do and for justice to be served for our victims. We have too many victims that are being hurt or worse, murdered by violent criminals that are continuing to be rolled out and put back on the street. So anything that we can do that gives law enforcement and the prosecutors the tools they need to keep our community safe and protect our victims is a win for all of us. Thank you.
Sheriff Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Zahnd. My name is Mark Owen. I'm the sheriff of Platte County, and I also have been here now in law enforcement for 42 years. And it was extremely rare that we had a homicide in Platte County for many, many years. When I took over as sheriff, we had basically 6 people in the jail for homicide. Through the times, it's now increased, and I believe I'm currently in custody 13. Most of those have happened in the city limits of Kansas City in the Northland, whom we work with every day as partners very well to try and bring crime rates down. But this is continuing to migrate even farther north, all the way to working with Sheriff Pruitt and up north and the sheriffs over in Clinton and Ray. That this crime is coming up. We're starting to see more of the vehicle carjackings armed. We're starting to see more of these homicides are just totally senseless. And a lot of them involve a bag of dope or it's time to rip somebody's money off. The vast majority, probably 85% of our homicides over the last few years, including what was in Kansas City, appear to be senseless over the fact that they're trying to steal somebody's money or they're trying to steal somebody's bag of dope. So we need these tools to continue. I looked in this morning in the jail roster. Currently, 22% of my jail population right now is either armed criminal action or illegal use of a firearm involved in some other type of crime. In that number, though, is a large number of repeats. And we're starting to see that more and more. We had a car chase here a couple of weeks ago. Weapons got thrown out of the vehicle while it was southbound on the highway. And I don't know if you've seen an assault rifle go out the window down the highway, but these weapons are more prevalent every day. And the officers are taking a greater risk every day, having to try and even walk up to a car or go on that call. And we need to get these tools in place to start stopping these people and keeping them where they need to be to try and make this a better situation for all of us. So with that, I just thank you very much.
Sheriff. I'll just add one personal story in addition to what you've already heard. I've had the privilege and solemn responsibility to serve as Platte County Prosecuting Attorney for the last 17 years. In the first 12 years of my tenure, we had zero, none, not a single drug deal related shooting in our county. In the last 5 years, we've had now close to a dozen such shootings, 4 of them resulting in homicides. That's a tremendous change and not one for the better. The sorts of crimes that we used to see confined often to the urban core are no longer confined there. They are spreading across Missouri everywhere. And again, police and prosecutors need the tools to address those crimes. So let me talk a little bit more. You've heard some talk about Senate Bill 600. I'd like to just talk about that a little bit more. We appreciate that crime has been a priority of this governor, who himself is a former sheriff, Governor Parson, and we appreciate the attention it's been given in the Missouri legislature. Now it's time for the governor to sign Senate Bill 600, which passed both houses in the Missouri legislature with impressive margins. It's an important first step toward decreasing violent crime in the state of Missouri. Let me be clear about something that Prosecutor White already said. Senate Bill 600 exclusively addresses violent criminals and career criminals. It does not change any laws, does not extend a single sentence related to low-level nonviolent offenders, changes that actually decreased sentences for low-level nonviolent offenders that prosecutors supported just one session ago. But now it's time to address the criminals who are wreaking havoc on our cities and our rural areas in our state. Let me just talk about 3 of the most important provisions of Senate Bill 600. Under that bill, persons convicted of murder will no longer be eligible to be sentenced to probation. It should be common sense that someone who has been found guilty of killing another person intentionally without legal justification should not be immediately released back into the community. But I will tell you that there are cases where exactly that occurs. Senate Bill 600 will also ensure that persons previously convicted of a dangerous felony will be eligible for enhanced punishment if they are later found guilty of illegally possessing a firearm. Again, we should all be able to agree that dangerous felons should face stiffer sentences if they illegally arm themselves with a firearm. Third, Senate Bill 600 ensures that persons convicted of the crime of armed criminal action will face stiffer sentences. The vast majority of violent crimes impacting Missourians, particularly those living in our urban areas, are committed with the use of a firearm or some other deadly weapon. Senate Bill 600 ensures that these violent criminals, again, not nonviolent offenders, but violent criminals, receive prison terms that will improve the public safety in all of our communities. So we urge the governor to sign Senate Bill 600. That bill, again, will protect us from the most dangerous and violent criminals in our state. It won't fill our prisons with low-level, nonviolent offenders because its provisions only address serious offenses. We also know that the governor has signaled his interest in a special session to see that we have other important tools to respond to the growing crime wave. And I know that Mayor Lucas has supported that call of the governor for a special session to address crime provisions. Let me talk about some of the things that have been left undone by the legislature where we could further improve Missouri's criminal laws. Both houses faced bills that would include additional funding for a statewide witness protection program. That bill was not particularly controversial. We all acknowledge that we need more money to safeguard witnesses from intimidation in some cases. But that bill, unfortunately, simply ran out of time and did not pass. We urge the governor to call a special session to address that important need. Secondly, we need a law to codify the case law regarding what is known as forfeiture by wrongdoing, and that's a criminal defendant's wrongful acts to silence the testimony of a victim or witnesses to a crime. Third, we need to improve the law when juveniles possess weapons by first requiring certification hearings for juveniles to be tried as adults for certain weapon offenses. Secondly, by increasing the penalty when an adult unlawfully transfers a weapon to a juvenile. And thirdly, by adding to the endangering the welfare of a child law provisions that encouraging a minor to violate Missouri's weapons laws is a crime. Fourth, we could further strengthen the armed criminal action sections contained in Senate Bill 600 by fixing some potential conflicts of that law with other Missouri provisions. I will tell you that on behalf of Missouri's prosecutors, and I believe on this I can speak for the sheriffs as well, that we will do everything we can to see that these provisions become a part of Missouri law. It's essential for our communities. Simply put, lives are in the balance. We urge the governor not only to sign Senate Bill 600, but to convene a special session of the legislature that will help us remove Missouri from one of the lists that, unfortunately, we have appeared on for many years, and that is being featured in news stories about having some of the nation's most dangerous and violent cities. Thank you. With that, we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Yes.
I have a question about the impact this would have on space in jails and prisons. My understanding is the area that I'm most familiar with, Kansas City, is still transporting inmates to Bryan County. How will increasing sentences impact the ability to keep them?
It's a really good question. So let me first talk about the statewide level. 3 years ago, Missouri had 32,000 people in the Department of Corrections. Due to the sorts of sentencing reforms that I'm talking about, including a recodification of Missouri's entire criminal code that occurred about 5 years ago, the prison population now is about 26,000 in the state of Missouri. The prison population in Missouri is going down. The reason is that we are finding better ways to address low-level nonviolent offenders. Both of my colleagues have mentioned treatment courts, which prosecutors have supported for decades. In fact, the first treatment court was started by the Dade County, Florida prosecutors some 30 years ago. Those are important tools to deal with nonviolent criminals. But for violent criminals, the people who prey on defenseless citizens, we simply need prison space to hold those people, to hold them for appropriate amount of time. And Senate Bill 600 does that. It will take some prison space to do that, but it will be prison space dedicated to the most violent and destructive criminals who prey on Missouri citizens. Other questions?
Can you give a
definition of a career criminal, a violent criminal, just so we know exactly who we're talking about that this will apply to?
Yeah, so Missouri actually defines what is called a persistent offender as somebody who has 2 prior felony convictions on separate dates. So separate dates of offense becomes a persistent offender. That makes people eligible for increased sentencing. And those are the sorts of people that we're talking about when we say career criminals under Missouri law. That's the persistent offender. Somebody who has repeatedly, by the time they're a persistent offender, has committed felonies, not just misdemeanors, but felonies on 3 separate dates.
There might be concerns. Missouri has had cases where people have been incarcerated for violent offenses, spent decades in prison, and later found innocent. Is there stipulations within this to ensure that will happen?
Yeah, so I will tell you that anytime somebody is erroneously convicted is a terrible thing. People sometimes ask me as a prosecutor, what's your worst nightmare? And they're expecting me to say something about a really bad crime or a really bad criminal. And the real answer to that question is just the opposite. My worst nightmare as a prosecutor would be convicting someone erroneously who did not commit the crime that I've charged them with. I'm pleased to say that, to my knowledge, it's never happened to me. I'm also pleased to say that it is incredibly rare anywhere that happens. It is news because it is absolutely horrific when it does happen. On those very rare occasions where somebody is wrongfully convicted, it is the worst thing the criminal justice system can do. But I will tell you that studies show that the American criminal justice system has a record that is above 99.9997% accurate. That's an accuracy rate that, frankly, car manufacturers, doctors, anybody who produces products, does anything else, would envy. Now, again, don't misunderstand me. It's a terrible, terrible thing when it happens. But we've gone a long way in Missouri to try to decrease that. One thing that prosecutors have done, we've got a best practices committee where prosecutors get together to try to improve our practices, not only to guard against erroneous or wrongful convictions, but to do our jobs better every single day to achieve justice for the citizens of the state of Missouri.
We hear a lot that this is the violent crime problem across our community is something that we can't arrest our way out of. Are you concerned that, adding stiffer fences will not be a deterrent to people who are hanging around the wrong crowds and continue to shoot up their neighborhoods and not care?
Well, look, it's not the only solution. The reality is this. By the time somebody gets into the criminal justice system, almost always, multiple other social institutions have failed them. People wind up in the criminal justice system because we don't have enough jobs, because families have broken down, because churches haven't been able to fulfill their message, because other social institutions, drug treatment, other things have failed them. But there is a place to safeguard the rest of Missourians when a child has been sexually abused, when a son has been murdered by somebody else, when a daughter has been raped. We need to ensure that justice will be done in those sorts of situations. And I do believe that sentences serve both as a deterrent, but we also know that they do this. They incapacitate those criminals from being able to prey on others outside of the prison system. And that's important for the worst of the worst, the violent criminals. And that's who we're talking about when we talk about Senate Bill 600. We're really only talking about the very worst criminals, the violent criminals, who I think the vast majority of us agree need to spend time in prison. Other questions?
Yeah, when collectively you say that these are crimes that used to just be in the urban core, and the crime is moving out into the Northland, are you saying criminals are moving out from the urban core, or that the types of crimes.
Really, it's the types of crimes. Now, we do, and we've always seen in Platte County, as every county does, that sometimes you see people outside your county who come into your county and commit crimes. But the fact of the matter is, when I talk about this increased number of shootings during drug deals, the majority of those are committed by Platte County residents against other Platte County residents. There is something going on in our society, and if I knew what it was, believe you me, I'd patent it and sell it to all my colleagues. But there is something in society that is making us, for some reason, more violent, where lives appear to be cheapened in some way, particularly with young people. Many of the incidents that I'm talking about are 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are arriving at drug deals with the intention of not paying for the drugs, doing what's called in common parlance a drug rip, where they're going to rip somebody off over small amounts of marijuana, and somebody pulls out a gun and starts shooting, and sadly, people die. I know that Prosecutor White can tell you that it's not unique to Platte County. It happens frequently in Clay County, and Prosecutor Holliday would tell you the same thing in Buchanan County. There's something that is happening that is different for some reason than it used to be. Thank you very much for your time.
We can there.
Sure. Yeah, if you all would just come up for a little bit, they'd like to get, I think, a picture with everybody.
I always appreciate how somebody that does this for a living. Well, it's true. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this.
Really appreciate it.
Well, no, I
Really appreciate you coming on.
Never met you. I had not met you
Well,
before,
sir.
so I kept hearing you.
Well, look forward to meeting you. This is